Hi, this is Beth from Around the Table Yarns. Tonight is Sock Club, and we are working on the Ribbit Socks by Celine Feyton. Tonight we are working on the toe, and so we'll be finishing up our socks and working on the shaping of the toe, setting up for the toe. Sorry, we will be setting up for the toe, shaping the toe, and then grafting the toe closed. So here is my sock so far, and the toe mirrors this part of the this pearl ridge at the top. And so you need to set up and do a pearl ridge at the top of the toe. And I will say that I tried these on and found that um, the length feels a little bit longer on my foot than other socks have felt, or maybe I just was being more generous um, with my foot. But if you look on the pattern, I will share the pattern. Here we go. So you should be able to see this page of the pattern. I'm going to make it bigger, bigger, make it bigger. Can I zoom in? Oh, where's the? We're on the toe and heel setup. I don't know if I can zoom in or not. This is page 9 of the pattern, and I just want to emphasize this paragraph here. The heel is currently 1 stitch off of center. So in other words, if I look at I look here, I'm starting on knit 2 and I'm ending on a purl 2. So I'm starting with the knit rib and ending on the broken garter rib or the garter rib. And so that is not quite in center. So what she has you do is to work around where you essentially move the beginning of round over. And the way you do that is you're set up to do your next knit round. So you finished working on your foot, having completed a ribbed round. So you can see at the bottom of my stitches that there are purl bumps and knit stitches and purl bumps and knit stitches. So you want to have finished having done a ribbed round. So we're going to knit this round, and you're going to knit for your size to 1 stitch before the end. So for me, there's 32 stitches across. So I'm only going to knit 31. And then in the directions, she tells you to pull the needle through. So when you knit across your 31 or 43 or whatever your number of stitches is across, you will work until there is 1 stitch remaining on the left needle. So I'm going to get all the way to the other side of my sock, and there will be 1 stitch left on my left hand needle, the needle that I'm working from. And when I get to there, you simply pull your needle through and turn. That then positions the end of that side in the middle of the garter rib. Then you work the 32 or the correct number for your half of your stitches. So for me, I'm doing 64 stitches, so I would work 32. And once again, that will take you to 1 stitch before the end, because I added 1 to this side. And so now my 32 will still stop 1 stitch before the end. I'm not going to count out loud though, because that's kind of annoying. So I'm just working over to the last but 1 stitch. for the last stitch. I'm stopping when I have one stitch on my needle. So for the second time, I get to one stitch before the end. It's one stitch left on my left needle, and I pull the left needle through, and I turn again to the beginning of my round. This will be, oh, so that's round one that I've just done. I've removed the marker. I didn't have a marker because I was working in Magic Loop, but I knit half of my stitches. So in my case, half of my stitch, or all but one of half of my stitches. So I worked 31 stitches. Then I pulled, if you want to make a note here, you would pull the, right here, it's pull the left needle through. Oh, and then you're going to turn and knit a 32, which is half of the stitches, and you'll have one stitch remaining, and then you again pull the needle through, and this is your new end of round, and one stitch remains unworked. So this stitch on my, when I turn, this first stitch is not worked. You can see that my working yarn is still attached to the last stitch I worked, and this stitch has not been worked. But my next round is a mirror of my the top of my sock. So my next round is all purl. So I'm going to purl that stitch and all of the other stitches as well. So you just go through and purl all the stitches around, starting with the unworked stitch and then continuing with all the other stitches. The round following that, you knit all the stitches. And then you're set up to do your decreases. So I'm going to do that work, and then we'll come back and I will show you the decrease setup. Okay, so I've finished the 2 rounds, and you can see that there's a round of purl stitches that makes the top of the foot, so the end of the foot, the beginning of the toe, it's just a separator, and then you work one round of knitting stitches, and then we're going to set up the rib. It's going to match, so it's going to continue the ribbing from below, but depending on how many stitches you have on your needles, which size you're doing, she's got the pattern written so that you need to just follow her directions based on your size. So I'm looking down here at the bottom of page 9 where it says round 4 ribbing, and she's got our color coding. So my color is here. I'm green. I'm the 64 stitch sock. And so here's for these sizes only. So if you're one of these sizes, this is what your first setup ribbing row is going to look like. And if you're doing one of these sizes, this is what your first setup ribbing row is going to look like. And what I just want to point out is that these are mirror images. So each of these rows are mirror images, and it's for each half of stitches. So knit 2, purl 3, and then knit 2, purl 2 across to the last 3 stitches, purl 1. So that makes the last purl 2 a purl 3, knit 2. So the knit 2, purl 3 is mirrored because purl 2 plus purl 1 makes a purl 3, knit 2. And then on the other sizes, knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, purl 2 to the last 5 stitches, knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, and that will mirror the other side. This is just the setup. In the next row, there's going to be decreases. So let's just do the ribbing setup row. put that in place. So mine was to knit two, and those are my selvage stitches at the edge of my toe. Sorry, my pattern has now gone underneath my camera. Okay, knit two, purl three. And then I'm going to continue in pattern in the ribbing. So if I had the knit rib below, I should be knitting. And if I had the garter rib below, I should be purling. And you're going to take that all the way over to the far side. Again, staying in the ribbing pattern of knitting the knits and purling the garter ones. I don't mean to confuse anybody. We're working in the round. So garter stitch in the round means alternating between knitting and purling. Okay, so I am to my last 5 stitches. So I'm going to purl 1, 2, and then the pattern tells me to purl 1 more and then knit 2. So my outside edge stitches will stay knit 2. My interior stitches are going to stay in pattern except for this one extra purl just in this row. And then after this row, after the next row, I'm going to start decreasing immediately. And once I start decreasing, I will simply maintain my knit twos at the beginning and the end of each half, and then stay in the rib pattern in between. So I finished both sides and I've worked, so I have my end of my the foot, I have my ribbed row or my purl row, and I've got my first ribbed row done with 2 knits on each side, and then we have, in my case, 3 purls, and we're going to start our decreases. And I just want to demonstrate the decreases. They are directional. So when you work these decreases, you're always going to work 1 knit stitch first, and then you're going to do a left leaning directional decrease for your second stitch. And they tell you to do an SSK, or Celine tells you to do an SSK. And I just want to show you a technique for doing an SSK that can make them lay a little bit flatter. And that is to go into this stitch knitwise, and then without removing it or doing anything else, go into the back of your other stitch knitwise. So I'm going in knitwise here, and then taking the tip of my needle without coming to the front, I'm just going to take the tip of my needle into the back leg, or the leading leg of the next stitch. And when I bring that through both of those stitches, and it can be a little fiddly to get through, I let the first stitch drop off and then pull on it a little bit to get it to tighten a little. So this stitch will tighten up that stitch, and then it will lay behind it. And that just makes a tidier left leaning decrease. And that's the one that's described by Patty Lyons in her Bag of Knitting Tricks books. This is a knit row. So we just did a ribbed row prior. So now I'm just going to knit over to the other side, and the other side of my stitches will get a knit 2 together, because that's the right leaning decrease. So you don't have to do anything new or fancy for that. It's just the same old knit 2 together that you always do. So I'm almost there. And I'm going to do that I'm going to stop 3 stitches before the end and do my right leaning decrease by inserting my left needle into the stitch that is 2 from the end of the needle. So I'm inserting my needle not as usual into that one, but into the one next to it, and then through the one closest to the tip, knitting those 2 together and coming off, and then knitting one more. So that gives me a pair of decreases that lean in towards the direction that they're decreasing. The SSK that I did here, which SSK stands for slip one, and then knit the 2 together through the back loop, which is a long thing to say for SSK. So this stitch here is a left leaning decrease. It's very subtle, especially since there is a purl row in front of it. And then this is a right leaning decrease. So I have my almost finished socks here. And I just want to show how those decreases look as you continue. So in her pattern, Celine Feyton has you work the decrease on a plain knit row and then work a rib row for a total of so many rounds, depending on your size. So for my size, I did it 5 times. For the smaller sizes, you might do it 3 or 4 times. And for the larger sizes, you might do it 6 or 7 times. And then once you've done that, once you've completed that, she has you begin to do the decreases every round. So initially you work the rib round and then you work a knit round with decreases and then you work a rib round with no decreases and then a knit round with decreases. And you do that again, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Then you continue working the decrease rounds every round. And that's what brings the tip of the sock into a more rounded curve and not just a shovel sort of shape. And you do that as many times as she indicates for your size. I ended up with 12 stitches on each needle. And then she explains to graft the remaining stitches closed. And that's what we're going to do next. So it makes a nice shape to the toe. And we like that. To graft your stitches, they need to be on 2 needles. And the needles ideally are facing to the right. I have to see if I have a darning needle sitting up here. Be right back. I need to just grab one. Oh, I dropped it. All right. So I have a darning needle, which is a large sewing needle with a blunt tip. I don't need a ton of yarn to get across these 12 stitches or these 24 stitches, but I do need a little bit more than this. So I'm going to break the yarn with about 12 inches on it and get that out of my way. I swear that I spend most of my time while knitting cleaning up my yarn and getting it out of my way. There's that. And I just want to start the grafting demonstration. So grafting is another word for what many people call the Kitchener stitch. And I find it really easy to remember if I pay attention to the right side and the wrong side of my work, or if I think about my work as having a right side and a wrong side. So I'm going to just bring this into focus and hope I have a nice dark pen. Sometimes my writing doesn't show up so well. So there are 4 steps to grafting. And the first one is for the right side. And I think of that also as the front needle. There's a big shadow. Oh. Okay, so I'm going to type in here because my writing does not show up. And let's make it nice and big. So I think of things as having a right side, and that when we're looking at it, the right side is also the front. So in that case, when you go into the first step, let's do 1. You go knitwise into the stitch. I'm not drawing. I usually draw this out, so I have to think. You go knitwise into the stitch and drop the stitch off. And then I want you to pivot your needle. This is going to make sense when you see me do it. And then you're still on the right side. You're still on the front. You go to the next stitch, and it's the second step. You go purlwise into that stitch and leave it on. And you pull the needle, the sewing needle, through. The wrong side is the back, because as you're looking at the back, it's on the wrong side. So that's our third step. And we go into that one purlwise. And drop off. And pivot your needle. And then the last, you're still on the wrong side, you're still on the back stitches. The fourth step is to go into the next stitch on that needle, knitwise, and leave on. And pull the needle through. But you have to set this up. So this is the basis of grafting, but you have to set it up. And to set it up, you need to do the even rows first. You need to go into, so I'm going to copy that row. I'm going to do that first. And then I need to do the even row of this one first. And then to finish it, when I only have 1 stitch left, I'm going to do my odd rows. At the end. So this is the setup. This is the main part of it. And then this is the end, or the finish of it. So 1, 2, 3, 4 are the steps you repeat over and over again, and you work on the right front first stitch and then the right front second stitch, and then the wrong back first stitch and then the wrong back second stitch. And you repeat that over and over again. But to set it up, you have to set up because each stitch that you have on the needle, you have to go through with the yarn on your sewing needle 2 times. So this is the first time through, and then this will be the second time through, and then you'll work the next stitch. So let's just look at what that looks like. So I have my needles set up with the needles pointing left. I thread my darning needle. And what I want you to think about is the stitches on the front needle are facing me with their right side facing me. And the stitches on the back needle are facing me with the wrong side facing me. So my setup, right side is facing me, I do the opposite. So I want to go through this stitch. This is my step 2, through this stitch as though to purl. So my sewing needle comes into the stitch as though to purl it. It comes below the knitting needle. So my sewing needle stays below the knitting needle and I pull it through. Now I go to the back stitches. They are wrong sides facing me, and I want to go through that stitch as though to knit. So to go as though to knit, I want to keep my yarn underneath my knitting needle. I'm sorry, that just went out of focus. I want to keep my yarn under my knitting needle, and I just maneuver the sewing needle knitwise, staying below the knitting needle, and I pull that through. So that's my setup. And then I go back to step 1. Step 1 is knitwise into the first stitch and drop off. Right here, people like to pull their sewing needle through to make the stitch. And what I find is that confuses you as to which step you're on. So don't pull your sewing needle through here. Leave it partly attached to the dropped stitch, pivot it, and go purlwise into the second stitch, or now the only stitch, on the end of your front needle. And that's when you pull it through. When you pull it through, you can be kind of firm, but you'll see that your yarn is coming out the front. So you know you've done steps 1 and 2 because your yarn is coming out from there. Then you go to the back, and in the back, the third step is to go purlwise through the first stitch on the back. So I come from right to left through that stitch and I push it off the needle, and I don't pull my sewing needle through. I pivot it to go knitwise into the next stitch. Then I pull it through. And now, pulling somewhat firmly, my sewing yarn and my needle is coming out the back. So I know I've finished step 4. So by grouping steps 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 together in the main part of this, you don't get lost in the sauce between whether have I dropped and stitch off? Where am I? So that's the problem that I've always had with doing grafting, is that I get lost in it. And by not pulling your working yarn through until you're done with that side, you can stay focused on what you're doing. So let's keep going. So I'm going to go knitwise and off, and then immediately pivot and go straight into the next stitch. And then I pull my yarn through, and I'm pretty firm, but I'm not yanking it. And then I go purlwise and off, knitwise and leave on to the back. Again, my yarn is staying below my knitting needles, and I'm staying pretty firm when I make those stitches. Knitwise and off, purlwise and leave on. It's very rhythmic. Purlwise and off, pivot, knitwise, and pull through. So the tricky one I always find is the knitwise on the back because you have to kind of get in there. Knitwise and off, purlwise leave on, purlwise and off comes right off, and then knitwise, I just have to kind of convince it that it's going to let me in. And you can see that it creates a row of what looks like knitted fabric. I ended on a ribbing row, and so this is a knit row in effect. It creates a knit row. If your yarn loops around your knitting needle, just push it off and give it a little bit of a tighten. And you do this across all 12 stitches until only one stitch remains on your two knitting needles. So we're nearly there. So you'll remember at the beginning when I did this, I started with 2 and 4, and the ending, I'm going to end with, so here's my last pass through of the main part, purlwise and off, knitwise and leave on. So now I have one stitch remaining on both needles. I have passed through each of these stitches one time. So to finish it, I do the last part, which is for the front one, step 1, knitwise and drop off, pivot, and purlwise and drop off. They call this a little ear because it sticks out a little bit, and you can eliminate that by simply putting your needle in at the base of the ear and pulling it in to the inside where you will be binding, or not binding, weaving in the end. So you can push that into the inside and there's no ears. So that's my grafted toe, and it looks like a row of knitting. And so that's the toe of the ribbit sock. Any questions?
You make that look so easy.
I love grafting, I have to say. I'm a weird grafty person. I just think it's fun to do. I just want to point out that our next pattern for Sock Club is the Stony Stream socks from Stephen West. We're going to be doing this October 6th, November 3rd, and December 1st. I think it's a pretty straightforward, this is my actual pattern. I got to go to Amsterdam and I bought these at his store. So these are two yarns that were hand dyed in Amsterdam. My husband picked them. It was my birthday, but I said, pick a color that you like and I will make you socks. And so I promised him these socks for over a year. But I'm really excited about doing this. It's a fun pattern and it looks a lot more complicated than it is. This is a, I wish, I wish my thing would focus. Focus! Why won't it focus? Will it focus if I do that? Sometimes it focuses if it's darker. Weird. It looks kind of like scales. It is achieved by doing stockinette and reverse stockinette with slip stitches in between them. So the blue going up like that is a slip stitch. So it's not a very difficult pattern to do. The components of the sock, the the ribbing, the heel and the toe are not going to be complicated. So I think it's going to be a very straightforward one and a lot of fun to do as a last project for this year. Again, the dates are the October 6th, November 3rd, and December 1st. If you purchase the yarn from us, we do give you a 10% discount, and the pattern we would sell you with a 10% discount as well. So I just want to shameless plug for our next project. So I hope you've enjoyed the Ribbit Socks by Celine Feyton. I've never said like and follow us in the comments, but feel free if this is a YouTube video, so like and follow us in the comments as well. And hopefully we'll see you next time.